Joining us now to have the conversation around whether or not the Santana High School shooter Andy Williams should be allowed an opportunity for parole after serving 25 years instead of 50 is Kaylee Anderson. He was a student at Santana High School the day that Andy Williams went on his rampage. Kaylee, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
You were shot at.
Correct.
Not hit, fortunately.
I was not. Yeah, I was lucky for someone that day.
What do you remember about that day?
I remember standing outside in between two buildings, a day kind of like any other, standing with my friends, and we heard what everyone assumed was some joker setting off firecrackers in the bathroom. And I remember seeing people coming out of that bathroom bleeding and, holding their sides, stumbling out. And they pointed and said that someone's shooting in there. And obviously the sane thing to do is to run away at that point, but when you're that young and you don't have any experience with that kind of thing, you just kind of freeze up and, oh my gosh, what's happening? Before I knew it, he's out there shooting people, and the moment I'll remember for a long time is him missing me by about a foot high, just shooting whoever was out there.
How far away was he from you?
I want to say something about 40 feet, 50 feet, I would say.
But he pointed the gun right at you?
Yes.
Do you think he was intending to hit you, or he was just
I don't think he was intending to hit me in particular. I think he was just shooting whoever was out there.
How has that experience shaped your life?
Not as much as I feared it would when it happened. Yeah. Obviously, it was a horrible experience. I knew people who died, or one person who died in particular, and I knew better a lot of the people who were shot. And you certainly don't forget the moment that a bullet almost hits you, for sure. But I am fortunate relatively in that it hasn't left me with a ton of lasting trauma that's wrecked my life. And I'm alive, so. All things told, I would say I'm pretty fortunate.
You were friendly with Randy.
Randy was a friend of a friend. I'd hung out with him before, yeah.
You were a junior.
I was.
So what was that next year like?
It was interesting. Back in 2001, when a school shooting happened, it was huge national news. These days, a 2-fatality school shooting might get below the header on CNN or something.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But back in those days, the last big shooting had been Columbine. So in the immediate aftermath, national and international media sort of descended upon Santee, which back then was, it's still, it's part of East County, but back then it had more of a small town feel than it does now. And it was just like a different world for about a week or two. Things started to settle down after that, but you try to live your life normally. That's all you can do. That's what the school did. They made counseling available to anyone who wanted it, and we tried to, go along and live our lives basically as best we could, and so we have for the most part.
So I want to share with our audience that you are currently a public defender.
I am.
So you became a lawyer.
I did.
Did that experience put you on this path, or had you already decided that you wanted to?
I had already wanted to be a public defender when I was that young, so I was very much of the mind that's what I wanted to do with this life, even before this experience.
You want to give someone who's accused every opportunity to prove that he or she is innocent? That's
true. I believe strongly in that mission, and I would say that my presence here today is driven from that same spring, I guess. I'm not here because I'm a public defender, and I speak for myself rather than for my office. Which
we want to make that clear.
My office has some involvement in Andy Williams' case, but I'm not here for them. I don't have that case. I'm just here as a victim. But I'm not here because I'm a public defender. I'm a public defender because I believe strongly in that mission, and that mission, and it's very personal to me in this case, is why I'm here. Andy
Williams pleaded guilty.
He
and
did.
I know a lot of people were relieved that the community didn't have to go through a trial.
Sure.
He was sentenced to 50 years. It's coming up on 23 years, I believe. And he is going to have an opportunity in March of 2024 to be up for parole because of a new California law that allows juveniles the opportunity to be up for parole after a 25-year term.
Right.
You probably know more about that
I
than
do.
I do.
I knew
Did
a
I
good
do
bit
okay?
about it. Yeah, you did fine on it, yes.
What is your reaction to this law? Why do you think this law was passed? Why is it important?
For myself, I would say that I think it's astonishing that we would sentence anyone who's 14 or 15 years old to life in prison for anything. I think that's a sad admission about ourselves, that we would take what a child does, a 14, 15-year-old child, and decide that, sure, of course, you're responsible for your own actions at any age. Andy Williams is responsible for the terrible things he did on March 5th, 2001. But to decide that because of that, there's nothing you can do for the person, and that they must be doomed to have, to be honest, 50 years to the rest of your life, even when you're 14 or 15, that's most or all of the rest of your life. To doom someone to that based on something admittedly terrible they did when they were 14 is astonishing to me. And it's a sad statement about ourselves that we either can't or won't try to make the future better. For me, when it comes to punishment of crime, we do that it must be for one of two reasons. One is because we want vengeance. One is because an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. He has to pay for what he's done because he took a life, and for him to spend the rest of his life in prison is him getting off easy. That's view number one of it. I take view number two of it, which is we punish someone to try to make everyone's lives better in the future. What can we do to make society better in the future, including for the person who perpetrates the crime, including for the people who are victims of the crime? And I just do not see how taking a 14-year-old, a 15-year-old, and putting them in prison for 50 years does anything to make society better.
I know you keep saying 14, 15 years old. Andy Williams had just turned 15
correct.
A few days prior. So had he committed this crime a few days prior, he would have been 14.
Correct.
And is that why you keep saying,
yeah, he's on the border, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So getting out of prison at the age of 40 versus the age of 65, that's a lot of life that you can still live.
It is. If I had my way, even when I was a 16-year-old, I would have let him out a lot earlier than now, provided that he had done the work to make sure that he wasn't a threat to people in the future and could be a productive member of society. But I think based on what I know, and I'm hoping that I'm going to get to testify at his parole hearing, he's done that work long ago. And he's ready to be out and be a productive member of society. So I think that the world would be a better place with him out in it. And
what do you know about what he's done over the past 2 decades in prison?
He's done a lot of programming. He's done a lot of work on himself. I know that he tries when he can to talk to victims of his crime, to seek to take responsibility for it. And I don't think he just does it because he's trying to get out. I think he would do it even if you told him you're never getting out of here. I think he would do it because he feels he owes it.
Have you talked to him?
I'm going to directly very soon, but not in person yet, no.
But you haven't communicated with him?
Not yet, soon.
Because why? You want him to know that there are people on his side?
Yes. Plus, I want to know, more details about what he's done, so that I can talk to the world about it. I only have what I know, secondhand at this point, and I'd love to talk to him about it directly. But yes, so because I'm hoping to talk about those things that he's done to improve himself, and because I want him to know that it doesn't matter, like. When you've done something like this, there's a great tendency for you to start thinking that your whole life is going to be about this one worst thing you've ever done. And God forbid any of us should have, our lives be about the worst thing we did when we were 14 or 15 years old. I would like to tell him that he does not need to apologize to me, and that forgiveness, if any is owed, was given to him long ago, as far as I'm concerned, and that I think he deserves another chance at life.
There are your former classmates who feel very differently.
Of course.
And they've started a petition to try and keep him in prison. They say when he's 60, he can be let out, but he needs to serve out the sentence that was handed down when he pleaded guilty. Do you fear that your opinion is causing hurt or harm to the other victims, the 2 boys who died, their families?
I know many people who and we've had this discussion before, some of us have, about whether Andy should get out or not. I do fear that, my opinion might cause hurt, or, that there's a division in opinion, but I don't blame anyone for their opinion. What happened that day was terrible. And one of the reasons that I have the opinions I do, and that I can't change them, they're honestly held, whatever they be. I feel I'm here because I feel I must act on it. I feel ethically bound to act on it. When you hurt someone, that hurt gets expressed in a lot of different ways. And I don't blame anyone for having, for feeling, those feelings about he needs to pay for what he's done. It's the same feeling that, has us putting, Andy in prison for so long. It's the same feeling, arguably a much worse version of it, that caused him to do what he did. He acted out of that, sense of like, I have been wronged, and I will make sure that the people who did this to me pay for it.
Because it later was revealed that he said that he was a victim of abuse.
And he was, yeah.
We're almost out of time, but
Sure.
I do want to ask you, I read that the recidivism rate for juveniles who are let out after 25 years through this new law is less than 1%. Of
course.
Why do you say of course?
When someone is young, it's a lot easier to re-educate them. It's the old, an old dog can't learn new tricks, right? If somebody's been committed to a life of crime for 40 or 50 years, it's unlikely that, sometimes people do change their lives around, but it's so easy to teach a 14-year-old to do differently. The brain is barely even, developed to the point that, a 20-year-old's brain is. When someone's a kid, it's a lot easier to change their path than it is when they're an adult, which is part of why I think it's a tragedy that we've even come this far without him getting out. So that's why I think that is, and that's why it doesn't surprise me to hear that statistic.
That doesn't surprise you?
No. It's so easy to teach someone to do better when they're young, when they're 14 or 15 years old. Prison, incidentally, is not a great way or place of teaching someone to do better. It's a highly traumatic place of its own accord. But it's all down to the person and the efforts that they put in. And Andy has put in the work to be a better person, and I think his rate, the chances that he does anything bad ever again would be even lower. And I think that even his, staunchest critics, the folks who want to keep him in, would concede that he's unlikely to do anything in the future. I think they base their argument on that that well may be, but he still needs to pay for what he's done. Whereas I take the view, like I said before, of what's going to make society best in the future. And I think the answer to that question is to have him out in it.
So you do believe that he should be allowed to be free after serving 25 years?
Should have been a long time ago, but this is the earliest opportunity, and I hope that he and State Parole Board give him that chance.
Do you know other people who share your view?
Yes.
Former classmates?
Former classmates, yes.
How many?
If I had to count, I know that there are at least a dozen folks who were there that day who share my opinion.
Right.
And not all of them are quite as vocal because, as you mentioned earlier, it's a thing that not everyone feels super comfortable talking about. It's not the most popular opinion in the world. I'm sure there are more people who want him in than would prefer to see him out who were there that day. But there are people in Santana who hope that he gets out.
How did you find out that he was going to be eligible for parole?
I have tracked his case since the beginning. I have been well aware forever. I know when the sentence went down, I was like, this is the parole date. It bothers me personally that he is kept in custody at all on my account, because that's part of the argument is, we need to make our victims whole. You need to pay for what you did to them. Not for me, I hope. So I have watched and waited, and I knew this day was coming long in advance.
So probably because you're so tapped in as a public defender yourself.
I reached out to his legal team, yeah.
You knew that the California law was changing, and
Yes.
you thought, wow, this is a chance for Andy.
Correct. That was the first thing I thought.
So you've known about this for a while.
I have.
Interesting. Okay, good. Anything else?
Can we do just two more quick ones?
Yeah.
You mentioned how you've talked to people about it that were there, about Andy
Yes.
getting out or not. Can you just go into that a little
How do
bit?
you talk? In what forum?
Typically, Facebook is
Okay.
the most common forum. Around about every March 5th, 2001, the topic comes up again. It's something where people make memorial posts. People talk about what should happen to Andy, and I feel the way I feel, and some other people feel the way they feel, and we talk about it. I'm very fortunate that it's never devolved into anything approaching a flame war. Everyone understands that we were all hurt that day, and it's an honest difference of opinion. And that's how I'd characterize it. And so I don't hope for any hurt or harm to any of those folks, because they were just as hurt, if not more hurt in most cases than I was.
Is it a Santana High School Facebook group, like a closed
No, just
forum?
people who know people who
Okay.
know people on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. Our producer Dorian actually spent about 2.5 hours on the phone talking to Andy Williams, and Andy shared a lot about what he's been doing the last 2 decades, his thoughts, his opportunity to be paroled.
Yes.
And we have not shared that yet as a news organization. We've shared some quotes, but we know it's a very sensitive issue still, all these years later.
Of course.
And interestingly, a lot of the victims want to hear from him.
I would say that there is a group that will facilitate contact between Andy and anyone who wants to talk to him. He's not going to reach out to people, because like the last thing a lot of people want is to randomly hear from the person who shot a bullet at them. But I mean, if you want to talk to Andy, there is the restorative justice group that will put you in contact with him and get you the prison clearance and get you in to let you know if you want to talk to him and see if he's earned it. Then you can do that.
Maybe for the people that don't want to take that step and actually seek directly, do you think that us sharing some of that audio would be
absolutely
something that people could seek?
Absolutely, because I know I know for sure that he's done a lot of work on himself. Is it work that's going to bring back a human life? No, of course not. But is it work that, in my view, earns his place to come back out and live free? I think so. Critics
may say, well, you're giving him an opportunity to present his case.
Sure. I believe he deserves that. I mean, it's for sure, like I said, he took a human life, and there's immense gravity to that. 2 human lives, and wounded 15 others, along with everybody else that had a bad experience that day. But there's gravity too to taking a human life by putting someone in a cage for up to 50 years. There's gravity to that, and I think that they certainly have the right to speak and be heard about that.
And you might not feel this way, we don't know, but hypothetically, if he was older, if we're talking about a 25-year-old or a 35-year-old or a 45-year-old, your big point I keep hearing is that he was 14, 15 years old. He was newly 15.
Yes, and the reason that matters to me is because it would have been so easy for if we had been a society that had said, look at what this child has done. Child has responsibility for their own actions, but no child takes a gun in their hand and shoots other human beings without something else having gone terribly wrong. And no child takes a gun in their hands and kills other human beings that can't be helped. And put very easily even on a better path where they can continue to live a life worth living. And instead we give up on all of those kids when they're, again, 14, 15 years old. We give up on them and say, rest of your life in prison for you. Or at best, you'll get out when, you got 1 foot into the grave. And I think that people like Andy deserve better than that.
All right, well, we'll have to see what happens in March.
Indeed.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Kaylee.